Hello, my fellow Americans. My name is Abraham Lincoln, 16th President of the United States. I'm here today to talk with you about the Civil War, also known as the War Between the States. This is one of the saddest and most memorable events in our country's history. The Civil War lasted from 1861 to 1865. However, you could say that it actually began long before that. Today, I'd like to talk with you about some events that led to the Civil War. As you know, in the South, during the 17 and 1800s, cotton had become an extremely important crop. Eli Whitney invented the cotton gin in 1793, hoping that it would decrease the need for slavery. However, the invention of the cotton gin actually increased the need for slavery in the South because it made it much easier to produce cotton. So farmers believed they needed more slaves to work the fields and pick the cotton. At the same time, the price of cotton was increasing. Textile mills in Great Britain and New England needed more and more cotton to use to make fine fabrics and textiles. Cotton soon became the South's most important crop. With the increased production and with slavery on the rise, the owners of the cotton plantations did not want to lose the right to own slaves, which they believed was a key to their success. In addition, during this time, sectionalism was on the rise in America. Differences were growing between the South and the North. The economy of the South was based on slavery and plantations. Cotton was king, and exports of cotton brought in most of the money in the South. On the other hand, in the North, large cities had developed. Many immigrants were moving in from other countries to work in factories. Industry and manufacturing were the main economy in the North. Products were manufactured in large factories and were shipped around the world. In the West, which was continuing to be settled, mining was a big economy. The West was connected by railroad and telegraph to the North and the South. The differences between the North and the South continued to grow over time. National leaders often decided issues on what was best for their section or region, instead of what was best for the whole country. In other words, congressmen from the South voted only based on what would help the South. Congresspeople from the North voted only on what would be most helpful for the North. And congressmen from the West voted on what would help their area of the country. These areas of the country soon began to develop their own sense of individualism. Some reasons for sectionalism were loyalty to a specific region, social and cultural differences, and economic differences. You can think of sectionalism like the sections of an orange. Sectionalism was just thinking of a section of the country instead of the whole. In 1804, slavery was outlawed in all northern states. The Mason-Dixon line, a line between Pennsylvania and Maryland, was now seen as the dividing line between free states and slave states. For a while, there were a fairly equal number of free states and slave states. However, in 1819, Missouri wanted to join the Union, but this would upset the balance between free states and slave states. So Henry Clay of Kentucky came up with a compromise. He suggested that a line be drawn in the places south of the land purchased in the Louisiana Purchase deal. Slavery would not be allowed in the states south of that line. This would keep the free and slave states equal. This became known as the Missouri Compromise. It kept peace between the North and the South for almost 30 years. Let's find out what happened next. Here's a map showing the Missouri Compromise of 1820. The areas in orange were allowed to be slave states. The areas at the top were free states. And the unorganized territory there was made free by the Missouri Compromise of 1820. However, in 1848, the United States gained new lands after they won the Mexican-American War. This new land caused a problem because the Missouri Compromise did not cover the newly won territory. Settlers in California, which were part of these new lands, asked to join the Union as a free state, but that would give the free states an advantage in the Senate because there would be more free states than slave states. Henry Clay again worked on a compromise called the Compromise of 1850. In this plan, California joined the Union as a free state. Remember, this was just after the California Gold Rush had occurred in 1849. The Compromise of 1850 said that the other lands gained from Mexico would be divided into two territories, New Mexico and Utah. The people there would decide whether or not to allow slavery by popular sovereignty. In other words, the people would vote. Unfortunately, another part of this compromise was called the Fugitive Slave Act. This law required all Americans to turn in people who had escaped slavery. If they refused, they would be fined $1,000, which would be equal to $28,000 today, or they could be imprisoned. This law was very unpopular in the North. As a side note, a fugitive is someone who escapes from the law. Now, at this point, many people had been escaping to live up north, and this law required anyone who knew of a former slave living in the North to report it to the authorities so that person could be recaptured and returned to their masters in the South. As you can imagine, this was going to be very, very bad for these former slaves to be returned to their masters in the South. Many Northerners did not like this law. However, they would have to be fined $1,000 if they broke this law, or they could be imprisoned. As the debate over slavery continued, following the Compromise of 1850, an author and abolitionist named Harriet Beecher Stowe began to write a fictional story called Uncle Tom's Cabin. Published in 1852, the book was very popular and sold more than 300,000 copies in America during its first year. Join me tomorrow as we learn more about Harriet Beecher Stowe and her famous book, Uncle Tom's Cabin. I'll see you tomorrow.